Hello, my fellow readers. It is I, Dark Symphony 777, and this is another fan fiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell for notification, leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story, and finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not a dictator or what it was, so please respect that. So, the story I'm doing is Teknisk Wereld, volumes, stories of 1 to 3. There were 6 stories. I couldn't get past the third story. Well, I got to the end of the third story, but I said I'm not reading the rest of this. This is just insulting, and I'm just not gonna read the other 3. I may read them in the future, but not now. So, what is this fan fiction about? Also, I apologize for sounding more muted than normal. I'm not really. I'm still kind of getting past the death of my grandfather. I'm actually recording this on December 23rd. It hasn't even been a week since he passed, so um, so there's that. So, what do I have to say about the story? Well, what do I have to say about the story is the idea is actually really, honestly, cool. Like, I really like the idea of this story from a plot perspective. So, for context, Teknisk Wereld is actually the Dutch word for technical world. Let me actually double check. Yeah, let's see. Dutch. There's Teknisk World. Tech World. Yeah, there it is. No, wrong. That's the wrong tab. Sorry about that. That's a future video. So tech world or technical world is basically a device that is actually a worldwide Yu-Gi-Oh MMO or massive multiplayer online. Honestly, that sounds really cool. The idea of interacting with the actual Yu-Gi-Oh monsters in an MMO sounds legitimately like a cool, like, oh yeah, you can just pet a blue eyes white dragon, you can just fist bump a dark magician, you can pet a Karibo. I would pet a Karibo. I like Karibo. I mean, look at this little full bar. I would pet that. I would pet that so hard. He's like, oh, you're so cute, and then Karibo would just completely cry. He's like, and then he just pointed all his other buddies, the Karibo brothers, and just gank you. But anyway, like, this idea of like a Yu-Gi-Oh themed MMO, it's just like, okay, you immediately got my attention with this idea. Okay, so what is it? Well, this story actually takes place in 2100 and actually has a lot of backstory. Basically, technology advanced to a crazy point, and they created Teknisk Wereld. Or yeah, you can actually see the whole idea of it right here in this little prologue. Basically, technology is advanced, and they decided we're just gonna make a VR, a virtual VR system where you can just go into the world of Teknisk Wereld and kind of interact with the Yu-Gi-Oh world, but you can all in this virtual Yu-Gi-Oh-esque world, and you can, you'll be hunted by them, you'll get to fight them, you get to commit duels with them. And one thing I would at least have to explain before I get into deeper is the fact that these stories contain a specific side version of traditional Yu-Gi-Oh rules. So everyone knows what Yu-Gi-Oh is. Like, everyone kind of knows. It's just, how do you do, fellow readers? But no, these duels and these fics actually fall under the Deckmaster rule. So what's the Deckmaster rule? Well, the Deckmaster rule is actually a sub-series of rules that were introduced in the anime exclusive Yu-Gi-Oh! Virtual Reality arc. So basically, for context, this arc kind of happens like halfway through the Battle City arc, basically everyone kind of gets sucked into like a virtual reality program by Noah Kaiba, and and the Big Five. In order for them to escape, they need to challenge and defeat the Big Five and Noah, and because they just want to possess the bodies. Basically, everyone kind of only knows this arc for like two reasons. One, Yugi and Kaiba versus Noah is like the longest duel in Yu-Gi-Oh history, franchise history. It's quite literally 41 full turns. It's fucking long. The other one is basically Taya versus Crump, and basically Crump being like a penguin, and it's like, I am a penguin, I will possess your body. Oh no, no, not my boobies. Yes, I will have your boobies. You pervert. No, I make these boobies. Wait, there's birds called boobies? Yes, there's birds called boobies. You didn't think there. There's also birds called tits. No, seriously, there's bird names are fucking weird. But anyway, these subset of rules actually fall are what's called Deckmaster rules. Basically, the whole idea of Deckmaster is you have one monster, one single solitary monster. You can choose whatever monster you want, and that is your Deckmaster. You cannot summon that monster unless you choose to. Basically, it's like a big complicated system. But the long story short is Deckmaster is a being that basically is at your side throughout the entire duel. They give you either passive or active abilities that your opponent cannot react to. So basically, if like your opponent plays like an Ash Blossom, so if your opponent plays like an Ash Blossom or something like that, you can just go, nope, it's a Deckmaster. You can't interact with that no matter what. Yeah, that's pretty much how Deckmasters work. Like, for instance, if they're like normal monsters, they can kind of just have made up effects. But if like effect monsters, they kind of get the effect of what they were. Like everyone kind of know, like for example, during Kaiba and Noah's duel, Kaiba uses Kaiser Seahorse, and Kaiser Seahorse gains like the passive ability, like he can summon light monsters with one less tribute, which allows him to normal summon different dimension dragon without a tribute because it's like level 5 or something like that. There's a lot of technical stuff with it, but like the main benefit is Deckmaster. You can summon Deckmasters whenever you want. They can just okay, they're on the field now at any point, but it comes with the risk of if you lose the Deckmaster, you basically lose the duel. So basically, like an alternate, it has risk and rewards. So like, oh, if you're pushing for a game, you can summon that thing, but if it dies and you lose automatically, it's like it's a neat, interesting side style of dueling. It's honestly interesting. I like it, but that's not how this works. Trust me, it's really weird. Uh, yeah, it's just honestly a weird story once you actually get into this. I mean, like I said, like concept wise, the idea is legitimately interesting. It's a legitimately creative idea, especially like in 2000. Yeah, that story was made in 2003, 2004. So the Yu-Gi-Oh was pretty much in its infancy. Like, and honestly, even like the idea is like, oh, that's interesting. And then in like hindsight, you realize this author basically kind of did like a miniature version of Sword Art Online. Like, no, I'm dead serious. Like, it's really creepy how much stuff with like SAO this author unintentionally gets right. Like, oh, AI with like guards getting lower and people actually dying actually happens. And people like having to settle everything in the duel, and they can't really leave until the whole issue is solved. Oh yeah, it's SAO. It's really quirky. But, and this is a big asterisk with the story, with the but, yeah, this story, this story coming up this early in the game's lifespan, like, okay, So, okay, so I know I have to do a lot of background stuff, but it's kind of important to get the context of what is wrong with this story. So this story was published November 14th, 2003. Yu-Gi-Oh came out, Yu-Gi-Oh, specifically the TCG came out around 2002. I believe that the OCG, I think, came out in like 2000, I think like 99 or 2000. And we got like several sets. So from beginning of the TCG to when this story first starts, we get Legend of Blue Eyes, set, the very first set that introduced like all the iconic monsters, including the Blue Eyes White Dragon, because of course he does. Because it's literally in the name. Pack number 2, Metal Raiders, and you can see Black Skull Dragon right there in the background. Spell the Ruler, which came out in September 16, 2002. Pharaoh's Servant, which came out in October 20, 2002. Labyrinth of Nightmare, which came out in March 1st, 2000. Legacy of Darkness, which came out in June 6, 2003. Ferrara Guardian, which came out in July 18th, 2003. And Magician's Forge, which came out in October 10th, 2003. So that is 8 packs that is introduced from the beginning of the TCG to November 14th. There is another pack that comes out like a month after the story happens, but we're gonna stick with these 8 packs. So, and this is where it starts to get a bit involved. So, what is the actual plot with Teknisk Wereld? So, I'm going to be specifically focusing on the first story because honestly, the rest of the story kind of falls on from this. So, the story goes: a girl by the name of Hope, what was her? Hope Gales. There she is. She finally turns 13. 13 is actually the registered age that you can be to actually get into Teknisk Wereld. And she finally on her 13th birthday, she goes to the registration area, gets a resonance, no, not resonance device. Cred. I completely forgot what it's called. It's like, I know it starts with an R or something like that. But it basically allows her to register for the system and get into Teknisk Wereld, and she even gets her own Soul Monster. Basically, the Soul Monster is basically your default deck master. Basically, everyone has the ability to just, you can just get a deck master permanently. What is Hope's deck master? Well, this guy, of course, the Celtic Guardian, or as the story likes to constantly refer to him, the Elven Swordsman. Oh, how you know? My name is Gaston. Oh, no one swings his sword like Gaston. No one has a flowy cape like Gaston. No one has bulging muscles like Gaston. So basically, she does the whole deal. She joins in. She hops in. She summons Gaston, and everything kind of just goes from there. So is that the full plot? No. Basically, she kind of just relaxes for a couple of chapters and gets to know the locals and trying to. Who am I kidding? I'm basically hyping up the story too much. Basically, she spends the first chapter playing like a loon, like she's only watched the anime. Okay, it kind of makes sense. She's like 13, so she admits she hasn't played. And when she starts playing like the anime rules against the first person, he like makes fun of her and calls her an N-gauge, which is honestly pretty damn funny when you think about it. Like, oh come on, everyone knows what like an N-gauge is. Yeah, N-gauge is those shitty bricks of a button. Is it a game system? Is it a phone? No, it's garbage. So anyway, after she gets called an N-gauge and actually properly learns how to duel, she still gets curbed up by a guy named Brew. And his deck master, the Dark Paladin named Russian, who's just very silent. He talks at the end, but he's silent. Silent, but deadly. And basically, they go around and run into other duelists, and they just kind of introduce each other. This is meant to be an introductory to the main group. Each one kind of has a deck master and a character, and it's kind of, and this is where it gets kind of weird because there's like unspoken rules saying that the deck master can just leave the virtual world with you, which makes no logical sense because it's supposed to be VR, and so now we have a ballooned up cast of like what should be like I think 7 people is now like like artificially ballooned to double that. It's it's really weird. Granted, I think like later in at the end of 3, 2 people actually die, so it kind of lowers, so it kind of evens out a little bit. But it basically then becomes a weirdly religious story where they come across this group called the Generals of Hell, and all of them want to just kill a bunch of people and revive Satan. And it's just, oh, so instead of doing like actual cool stuff, like I don't even like, okay, the villains going around actually like hacking into Teknisk world in order to like gather the souls because it'd be like a crime you could hide really well. Okay, that's actually not a bad plot point. Like, okay, let's just lower the firewalls preventing people from getting legitimately injured in this program, specifically so we can kill them and take their souls. Because, like, oh, they're in virtual reality. How can they ain't gonna be able to trace that. Which is honestly a really smart plot point. Like, not like unironically, that's actually pretty damn creative. But then we get to the biggest problem. No, I'm not going to talk about the biggest problem yet. We'll get there. And it's basically the entire point of basically the story just kind of starts repeating where the Hope and the group they just wander in a place, they meet a random general, they fight the general in a duel, they win, and then they just rinse and repeat over and 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 over again for the entire rest of the story. You want to know when they start fighting them? Chapter 11. And literally for many chapters afterwards, they fight a bunch of generals. The generals last like all of a couple sentences or a couple paragraphs, and that's it. That's it. It does get a bit complicated as the story goes along because it starts borrowing very heavily from Christianity with like the facts of the God cards. The God cards. Okay, this is just really weird. The God cards specifically were created in real life, not from the Pharaoh. No, they were specifically created by God to basically act as living locks for Satan. What? Huh? You so like there comes a point where like okay, this is just getting really unnecessarily complicated, and I, I honestly don't know. Like, like, okay. There's a reason why always, whenever I ask someone, like, whenever I talk about like these fan fictions, like, and I'm talking specifically about people who are just kind of starting getting into writing specifically. And I always say, don't try and overcomplicate things. You're just starting out. You're kind of just getting into the flow of things, so you don't know how things work. Don't make an overcomplicated story until you're comfortable enough with your writing stuff, with your writing skills, in order to do that. It's why I simply prefer when you're a newbie, you start with simple stories. This is not simple. This is quite literally the author overcompensating for this for trying to want to have fun. Like this is just what I don't. I'm sorry, my mind is scattered, but I'm just so confused about this story. It literally just baffles me. Like, how can you like the only possible explanation why so much of the story was butchered was due to the fact the author was not skilled enough to basically be able to pull this off. It really doesn't help that the author kind of has like a lot of anachronistic story, like a whole anarchostic part. Like this story takes place in the 2100s. Meanwhile, all the cards that are mentioned are like from 2002 to 2003. You can make an argument. It's like, oh well, Teknisk Wereld is like a new thing, so they want to like drip feed the cards, so they're just replicating like the production out sets from the original Yu-Gi-Oh. So it's like, okay, you can make an argument for that. But then you go like, oh, the duels are like shit, and also the fact that like no one, despite the fact the whole thing of like the prologue being like, oh, monsters can hunt you, like there's barely any of that. Like at the in the first story alone, the only instance of like a monster hunting is like when Hope kind of shows up at the beginning of the in the world and she gets hunted by a Hercules beetle. That's kind of it. But after that, she just gonna get ignored, and there's a whole thing like monsters like randomly being able to just appear whenever they want in outside the world, despite the fact it's supposed to be virtual reality. It's like there's not a lot of internal well, there is internal consistency, but it's like it's consistency that makes like no fucking sense when you put like 5 seconds of thought into it. And it really just baffles me, like how do you mess something like this up in this way without like being like a newbie at writing, which is what I think this author is. It's like, okay, the author probably just doesn't really know much about writing, because you can actually, if you actually read through the series, I'm like I said, I'm only specifically talking about the first story, but if you actually read through the entire series, you can actually find out that the author does actually get better at writing. She actually get the plots actually make more sense as the story goes. It's still gonna get stupid in parts. Like in the third story, the entire plot kicks off with one of the character Max's his deck master Terror King Archfiend. Uh, Apparently he's like been hiding a fucking random ass second personality called Thanatos, because Thanatos like absorbs the negative energy from from Max's depressive and suicidal thoughts to kind of keep him like mostly there, and it just like what that doesn't really make much sense. I'm honestly just confused about the whole thing, because where does this second personality come from? It just comes from nowhere. It's like, oh, okay, okay. Okay, so why? Okay, so but again, it just boggles the mind. Like, okay, I can understand it's like some foreshadowing, or like, oh, okay, like you, like, or even like Olympian being like so monstrously powerful that he kind of just sneaks in. He's able to like appear in the real world, unlike everyone else. That would have made much more sense, because it would have been much more significant. But no, he's just like, oh, he dies, and all of a sudden he just kills. He starts wanting to kill everyone because he starts calling himself Thanatos. And also the simple fact that he keeps constantly wanting, like, oh, I'm going to kill all you, and then like he doesn't kill anyone, despite the fact he breaks someone's back. He like breaks someone's arm and collapses their chest. Oh, they survive at the end. Like, oh yeah. What? It's like, and these are not even like adults. These are like kids doing this. You're like, I think like 14 and 15-year-olds beating the shit out of each other. I think like the oldest is the character Brandy, and she's like, I think 17. They never really say the age of any of the characters except for Hope, who like the first story literally starts on her 13th birthday. So it's like, okay. And then you have the contrived coincidences of this story. Like, I know, like I said, I know I'm not going into the plot at all, because like, how the fuck am I supposed to explain the plot of the story? It's just girl goes into world, meets friends, has to stop a cult from summoning Satan using the power of Yugioh. It's just I'd rather just talk about my complaints right out the gate and and then skip the rest, like talk about the plot any longer, and it's like move to the characters and stuff like that. Here's another problem: the contrived coincidences. For those of you who don't know what a contrived coincidence is, contrived coincidences are a storytelling device used in any sort of media to basically force the story to go into a direction. Now, the whole point of a novel or any story really is you're trying to make things flow as naturally as possible. Go A turns into B, go segues into C. That sort of deal. You want this to be free flowing, so that way it feels natural. It's a way to build immersion in your story. However, sometimes you kind of need to force the issue, which is where contrived coincidences come from. Now, these are not meant to, contrived coincidences are not meant to be bad. They can actually be good, and sometimes they are necessary. Probably one of the most, well, probably arguably the most well known show to use contrived coincidences is Phineas and Ferb. This show basically runs on contrived coincidences. Basically, the whole idea that every time when Phineas and Ferb do something, Doofenshmirtz happens to be doing something at the same time that involves Perry. That's a contrived coincidence. And even then, another contrived coincidence that every time when Perry stops uh, stops Doofenshmirtz, no matter what happens, Doofenshmirtz's item or whatever he does is immediately gonna cause whatever Phineas and Ferb to do to basically just disappear to kind of keep the status quo. Those are basically contrived coincidences. Basically, these are kind of needed in Phineas and Ferb in order to sell the show. This is basically kind of how Phineas and Ferb kind of needs to run. It needs to run on contrived coincidences, otherwise the story would just make no sense. However, there is a reason why Phineas and Ferb are allowed to get away with this, and that's because Phineas and Ferb is an episodic show, unlike Teknisk Wereld, which is a long story. So what do I mean by that? Well, instead of being like one long story, Phineas and Ferb is basically 140 small stories. Episodic shows like this are able to get away with contrived coincidences much more often, because honestly, especially Phineas and Ferb, which kind of needs it needs to contrive coincidences in order to properly operate in its world. It kind of just it kind of needs to do that. Meanwhile, with Teknisk Wereld, it is a long form story. It's one massive story, and if you constantly put too many contrived coincidences right next to each other back to back, you get you basically slowly get pulled out of the immersion, and you can kind of see that the author's just kind of forcing it. It starts to become noticeable and kind of becomes forced. Like I said, you can have contrived coincidences in a story. In a story like this, you just can't put too much. But here's the issue with Teknisk Wereld: every single chapter contains a contrived coincidence. This is one long story. Literally every single major plot element, not only in this story, but Teknisk Wereld 2 and 3, everything is done by contrived coincidence. They just randomly show up somewhere. They just randomly meet a random general or anyone. They just randomly find some bullshit, and then they just randomly progress. It makes no absolute sense how the story is structured the way it is, and then you just expect it to kind of just flow frequently. Like, it boggles the mind of how this story is structured to just have this shit. And even then, there's like the whole MMO idea. It's like, oh, it seems like the main characters are like the only people who are here. Like, you don't see them interact with anyone, besides like a few friends or like these three idiots, or like some idiots that are like parodies of anime duelists who only read the anime and stuff like that. And then it's like a few minor characters that are like connected to the characters. It literally makes no sense. But yeah, it is what it is. Like, that's really all I could say about like the plot related stuff. I mean, let's just move on. And I spent way too much time talking about this, but I just want to move on. Characters. I actually think the characters are fine for the most part. Hope Scales is basically like an out of your depth girl, just learning the ropes. Like I said, the whole point of the furry first duel is the fact that she's kind of operating under anime duels, and she kind of has to learn the ropes as she goes along. And she basically just like she grows on her own. She has a warrior deck. Her deck master or Gaston basically allows a warrior to like random to attack directly, but I think only that monster can attack that turn if they do it. So it's a good. She's a good character. I don't. She's technically the main character because like most of the plots revolve around her. Anything about this story when it comes to characters is the villain is the final duels were like the big bad. Hope only really does that for like what only for first story. Meanwhile, two of the other characters are kind of like the main fight the main villain like the other two stories. It's actually interesting, especially since like in Yu-Gi-Oh animes uh, that usually like the original, it's always the main character that always gets like fights the big bad. It's like, oh, only Yami can beat Merrick. Oh, only Jaden can beat Yubel, and and so on and so forth. Uh, and honestly, it's not even just Hope. I like all the characters. I like the fact that they don't really act mature. They're kind of like some of them are goofball, some of them are like serious. They actually act like kids, which is basically all of them. Brandy acts like an adult because I think she is supposed to be the only adult of the group, at least until like Miles and Zach show up and join in the second story, and Zach's like explicitly like mentioned to actually have been married and had kids, and even when he was like, murdered, and then he kind of came back as a robot, and like he doesn't even know why, and he even like he's so despair. Like, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's a lot of characters. I'm only gonna focus on uh the human characters because for the most part the soul monsters are kind of just there. Like the only ones I really kind of like are Olympian because he's like the only plot relevant uh soul monster because he's kind of needed for Max, and Neo, who's kind of like a running, he's like the butt monkey of the group. Neo the magical swordsman. Let's talk about him. I like Neo. I think Neo's hilarious. I like the running gag that he is so goddamn determined to cook because he keeps watching Home Improvement that it's implied that he that not Matt. I'm trying to remember what the guy. I'm trying to remember what the guy's name is. Oh, also, this is like a weird thing. I'm going to talk about this in a bit. Max, there it is. No, Max is an Olympian. Let's see. No, not these two. Will, yeah, there it is. Will, it's Will. Will is like has like a special insurance deal because Neo just keeps cooking, trying to use his kitchen and just blows it up to the point where even Will is like, oh, he uses like the explosions as a fucking alarm clock, and he even freaks out when the kitchen doesn't blow up. It's like I'm so used to the kitchen blowing up. Him not blowing up has me scared. And he finds out he's watching Home Improvement with Mana, the Dark Magician girl, and he's like, he completely loses his shit. It's like, oh no, no. Basically he's kind of like the goofy thing, but Neo is also written that he actually completely cares about Will and still considers him a best friend. They kind of have a good rapport. I like Neo. Will's probably the weakest of the main group. He's there to really just kind of act as a foil for Neo. He's basically another sort of grown up character. He kind of lives on his own, and he kind of has to deal with insurance, so it's fine. There's Rue. He's basically meant to act as a foil for Hope. Hope's supposed to be like the little kid character, and Rue's like the more serious one who's like, okay, he's meant to act as a foil for Hope. and then you got Max, who's basically like this depressive character who who's like suffering from depression and suicidal tendencies to the point where Olympion just absorbs the negative energy to kind of keep him from going down that path. There's Miles, who's basically a gentleman thief who kind of inadvertently killed a town as a kid because someone was like trying to kill him and he kind of just panicked and he kind of blew up the town. And even then, the person hunting him still survived and basically cut his neck, so he has like a gigantic scar across his neck, so he has to kind of wear a bandana across it. Zach, who kind of inadvertently killed his best friend because the guy was following orders and kind of killed his wife and kid, Zach's wife and kid. And in his grief, he kind of killed the guy, and once he realized it was his friend, he kind of just completely fucking broke down, like he lost everything. And he got turned into a robot who who had like a built-in function saying like, no, we're gonna torture you. You can't kill yourself. And if you do, the program will literally prevent you from killing yourself. And he's kind of like a more somber character who kind of just joins the group because of like he kind of doesn't really have anywhere else to go, so he's like he kind of just, can I join you because I don't really have any other purpose to join you. It's like, yeah, sure, why not. And there's also Brandy, who's supposed to act as a foil for Max. Max is supposed to be like this very depressive character. Brandy's like the more outgoing, sporty character to the point where she trained herself in like boxing and stuff like that to the point where if she even that she literally destroyed her legs, and if she even tries to push herself anymore, the muscles in her legs will actually tear because they're permanently damaged, and she can't push herself every time she tries to push herself, the muscles get damaged again, and she has to rely on mana to kind of constantly prepare the muscles to kind of get her back into like a state where she can walk. They're a really hodgepodge group of characters. I know I forgot like Draken, who's kind of like he was a general of hell, but the reason for him joining was like he was actually tricked, and when he died, he kind of got and Satan was stopped. God like took all the souls. He's like all the good souls. They kind of come alive, and he's kind of part of that because he was genuinely actually a good person who was just kind of whose only crime was like he couldn't really move past his sister's death. That's really it. But he's kind of like he's just a cool guy who just kind of shows up. It's like, nah, I'm fucking badass. Just kick everyone's asses. He works. He works. Like these characters are actually not bad, and they even work well together. They have a lot of good chemistry. The author worked on them pretty well. They're fun. I like them. Grammar error. This is actually something that's actually interesting. Hold on, I actually have to show you this. I gotta go back to this. Where is this? No. No. Oh, where's that thing? Yeah, here it is. This is something I've only ever seen in this fic. I don't know why, but it exists, and that's not the only thing. Okay, so what you're seeing is actually a picture I took of the mobile version of this story. And okay, you think it's formatted pretty, commonly. It's like, okay, it's formatted properly. But no, when you look at the same part on the fanfiction app, the formatting just gets completely fucked up. Huh? I unironically never seen an issue like this before. It's so weird. Like I never what even happened? Like it's so weird. And it's not even that. There's a lot of weird issues. Like there's another weird issue where the author constantly uses the Japanese version of the word. So for instance, let me actually. So this is Butterfly Dagger Elma. This is actually a very famous equip card. It's actually been on the ban list for decades at this point because it causes way too many loops. No, trust me, you don't want to know how infamous this story infamous this one card is. This is actually the TCG name. So a lot of people like to use the TCG names. A lot of people in America, a lot of people in Japan likes to use the OCG names. Another common one is the Dragon Maid archetype, where the wording of it is actually very vastly different between the TCG and the OCG. So basically, in the TCG, you made the naming convention is basically their job, then Dragon Maid. So like for this lady, House Dragon Maid. In the OCG, however, the names are actually completely different, where they actually have full names that are basically their job, like for instance, House, but spelled in a way that it comes off as an actual name. So in the TCG, this card is called House Dragon Maid. However, in the OCG, she is actually called Dragon Maid Housekey. Basically, it's still basically a purposely misspelling of housekeeper, which still fits the name, fits her job as a housekeeper and head maid, but also still comes off as like an actual name. And this happens with all the Dragon Maids. Dragon Maid Laundry is called Dragon Maid Laundry. Dragon Maid in TCG is called Dragon Maid Laundry. In the OCG, Parlor Dragon Maid is called Dragon Maid Parlor. Chamber Dragon Maid is called Dragon Maid Chains, so on and so forth. It's basically a weird. However, in this story, there's a weird habit of the author using the OCG names, and it makes no fucking sense. So, you're telling me we're gonna have a group of characters that are all American, and the story takes place primarily in South Carolina, and you have every single character exclusively use the OCG names. Have to, like, okay, if the story was like in Japanese, I understand because it'd be like, you gotta have to do it. But no. Instead, the author deliberately uses the OCG names, which confuses the hell out of, and it more likely confuses a lot of people because you would have to because okay, some of them are obvious, like okay, Elven Swordsman, all right, Celtic Guardian, that's obvious, but then you have fucking Terror King Archfiend. I shit you not, like it. Let's see, where the fuck is this guy? No, I went too far. Yeah, here he is. No, yeah. Crap, I'm trying to find. Where is he? Where is he? I'm trying to find. Give me a second. Here he is. Like, okay, Elven Swordsman being like Celtic Guardian is one thing, but Genocide King Demon. You're telling me that is supposed to be this fucker? Like you like how what? Like I didn't even know this guy's Japanese name, and I had to actually look it up, and even then I had to actually search for a couple minutes just to find out. Yeah, it's this guy. It's this fucking guy. But no, it gets worse. In book 3, there are across these 3 stories, there's a running gag of this group of characters called Caleb, Ifrit, and then later Buster Blair, who's supposed to be parodies of basically normies who only know of the Yu-Gi-Oh from the anime. All right, that's fine, making fun of that. But then then the author does a really weird bit where all of these characters are presumably English, and then Caleb calls says the TCG name for Butterfly Dagger Elma, and then the other characters basically just said he needs to learn their proper names. He's completely mutilating Dagger of Butterflies Iruma, which is the TCG name of wrong one. I forgot I skipped that. Which is the OCG name for Butterfly Dagger Elma. What the fuck? Like honestly, this just it's so confusing on why the author decided to do this. If the author was like, okay, so Caleb's like Japanese, it's like okay, everyone in America is saying the OCG name, but the Japanese guy's using the American name. Okay, that'd be a neat little fun little in joke. It's like okay, it's making fun of like translation things because like the TCG, Yu-Gi-Oh TCG is like notorious for either having like dumb names or like punny names. Like you can't tell me this is a card game that made a card called fucking freaking Dr. Frankenderp. Like you can't no you can't you like there's limits to like how stupid these guys can mess with their names. So having a story in 2000, I think the story takes place in 2006. I think it's 2005, 2004, 2005, and then randomly going, I'm going to randomly have this American character see the American name of a card, and then they just throw a fucking random dig. Okay, I gotta actually find. Oh goddamn! I gotta find this. Yes, I gotta actually fucking find it, and then they just completely like randomly shit on a guy using the TCG name, despite the fact you're writing this in English. Most people they're not going to realize what specific cards you're using if you're going to use the OCG names because guess what? English speakers are going to mostly know of the TCG names. So just it's so it's notoriously bad. And I'm not even getting to the duels itself. The duels are like okay, there's a reason why I had to stop reading after the third story. The duels suck. And we're getting into pacing right now. Honestly, I think outside of the duels, the pacing is fine. It's a little basic. It's kind of rush, but okay, I can get it behind it as like an amateur mistake. But then you get to the duels. Like okay, there's a reason why a Kaiba versus Yugi at Battle City is still considered by many to be the best duel in the entire franchise. Like there is no honest to God equal to this because everything is paced perfectly. Every move is deliberate. You get to see their mindset and everything. You get to see the plans they make. But the duels in this suck. Like this, the duels in this are insulting as a Yu-Gi-Oh fan. This is the reason why I didn't want to read the other three stories because I have played Yu-Gi-Oh for going on for like 23 years. And I don't want to read a story that plays like this. Also, yes, this is me. So just watch to see how dull it can get. Yeah, you see how, Yu-Gi-Oh duels can be when you have no commentary and no way to build everything up and everything just kind of I don't know, flows randomly without any rhyme or reason. Yeah, and it's fucking boring, especially when you have to watch that every single duel. It is obnoxious where everyone is like, "Oh, I play Cyclone," which is supposed to be MST. It's like, "Oh, my magic cylinder," and I attack. Ah, it gets boring. Like, like, there's a reason why people want to see like not only like how the monsters look, but actually see them attack and see them interact. there's a reason why I like you Twilight Sparkle versus Twilight Sparkle, that one My Little Pony fanfiction duel where Rainbow Dash tricks them both into dueling, and there's like a little plot line where like the human Twilight's Gen X monsters actually start behaving weird, and everyone's kind of like suspicious, and it turns to like complete shocked when Gen X ally Axel just completely protects shields Twilight from it being destroyed because she doesn't want to, because it knows that it doesn't want to see it be destroyed. Like it it makes the duel worth wanting to read because you get to see the personality, the whole aspect of it. You get to see them react and talk about everything. There's a lot that goes into making a good Yu-Gi-Oh duel, and this ain't it. Yes, you can make the arguments like, okay, the story is like very in the beginning, so there's not really a much. But no, I have read plenty of stories where the duels actually are still like very basic, but still get the job done because they have a lot of meaning behind the words. Every action matters. While in these stories, everything just feels so rushed that you kind of just don't care. Like it's dull and uninteresting, and also very insulting as someone who's played Yu-Gi-Oh and still plays Yu-Gi-Oh for over 20 years. Like, honestly, if the story didn't have the dueling, I would say the story is inoffensive. It's not great, but I wouldn't call it outright bad because you can also see the author actually improving on their writing as you get through the stories to the point where let me actually get to this one, New Generations. Like you can actually see the author is actually actually gets better at writing, actually learns to like how to iron out the kinks. So it's like, okay, I can get behind that. But no, the dueling just completely shoots the like any goodwill I have for the story in the foot because it's not even good. It's insulting. It's just there's bad and then there's this. I don't have any more to say about this story. No, I'm not going to review it. I'm not going to recommend it. If the duels didn't exist, all right, I could probably recommend it as like a curiosity, as like a curio, as like, oh, here's a story that had a good idea but was wasted because the author, didn't really have the skills to do something to execute something like this. But no, with the duels, it's just no. And also the Japanese names, like, come on, it's just insulting. That's just insulting one's intelligence. Do I have a favorite part across these three stories? No. Oh no, the whole running gag of Neo blowing up the kitchen to the point where, but I already talked about that. I find that funny. I don't know why. I just find it funny. What would I change? Honestly, I think the story just needs someone to adopt it and just rewrite the entire thing. I'm pretty sure the authors probably abandoned it. Uh, but if you wanted to keep the thing the same, honestly, just get rid of the dueling. Like, it's bad. Like, it's like okay, like okay, so like this is bad. Like, come on, just it's just okay. I play Jarkery. Jarkery is also a card that exists. Like, okay, like it's like it doesn't really do much. So just get. Honestly, I think that the dueling is like a bugbear. Like, not every single Yu-Gi-Oh fanfiction needs to have dueling. Like, you could have just incorporate actual RPG elements. Have the dual monsters, except for Olympion, should only exclusively be in the dual monsters world. And I think that should be good enough. The story just needs a major rewrite, honestly. So I don't really have much else to say. I apologize for not being like more technical about the plot and stuff like that, but it's just like I'm still kind of bummed and still kind of depressed and still kind of out of it mostly. But I wanted to at least try and add in like a lot more details, which is why you saw a lot more cuts. I had to keep pausing the videos and cutting to the pictures and stuff like that because I at least want to get better at this stuff. So yeah, there's that. I hope you enjoyed this review. So this has been Dark Symphony 777 and cut.